Hello students, in this video we will talk about mobility and reproduction once again. Earlier in the previous video we have discussed about the meaning and types of mobility. Mobility means movement, and when it is in the context of society, then it is termed as social mobility. So, in the previous video we talked about the mobility which is both horizontal and vertical. We also talked about the range, that is from downward to upward or from upward to downward. Now further this topic will discuss in detail further avenues and dimensions of mobility and reproduction. So let's start this with the meaning of social mobility. As we know that social mobility can be seen in all the societies, even in the closed societies like India, because where the system of caste is still prevalent, that is said as closed, because it is not achieved but ascribed, means from cradle to grave a person is associated to the caste to which he belongs, but still here the concept of social mobility exists. Industrialization has been argued significantly that because of it the rates of social mobility increases, as because of industrialization number of avenues takes place, number of dimensions open for the people to move from one place to another in search of occupation, in search of job, in search of education, and all these resulted in the increase in social mobility of the population. Consequently, much of the mobility research has focused on the study of social mobility in industrial societies and the factors affecting mobility here. As we are very much familiar to the name of a famous sociologist P.A. Sorokin, who has worked a lot on the social mobility factor, he has given certain primary factors which affect mobility in all these societies. And he also discussed about the secondary factors that are specific to particular societies at a particular time. Means according to P.A. Sorokin, there are two factors which are responsible for the mobility. First is primary and second is secondary. That has been argued that no society can be regarded as completely closed, denying any mobility, nor it can be completely open, as there are always barriers to mobility. Means we cannot say that there is a society where social mobility is not possible. Means the existence of social mobility is always there in every society. Secondly, it can also not be said that it is completely open. Means social mobility is very easy to take place, because here again it is important to underline that there are always certain barriers which are in the way of social mobility as hurdles. He listed, means P.A. Sorokin listed 4 primary factors which are responsible for social mobility. First is the demographic factor, second is the ability of parents and children, the faculty distribution of individuals in social positions, and most importantly is the change in the environment. These are the 4 prominent primary factors given by P.A. Sorokin. So, we will discuss about them one by one, and let us start with the first primary factor, that is the demographic factor. As the name itself suggests, demographic deals with the population. Now, as we are familiar that certain natural disaster when takes place in any society, population get disturbed. Birth rate, death rates definitely marks an important factor in the study of demography of a particular area. So, when we talk about the demographic factor, then definitely it is that factor that affects mobility in all societies. In general, it has been observed that the birth rate of higher group is lower than that of lower groups, even though the death rates of the lower groups are higher. The net reproduction rate is such that there is usually some room at the top for members of the lower groups. Alex Engels, in his study of stratification in the Soviet Union in the middle of this century, attributed the very high rates of mobility there partly to the loss of lives in war, necessitating the higher degree of mobility. This can be explained in a very simple manner in this way, that because of war, because of any natural calamity, definitely it marks an impact on the death rate of a particular population in that particular area at that particular time. At the same time, we also cannot ignore the development of science and technology, which results positively in the increase in the birth rates. So, the influence of higher birth rate and lower death rate or vice versa definitely marks demographic factor responsible for the social mobility. The other important reason of higher degree of social mobility can be regarded as rapid industrialization. This is true not only in terms of higher and lower groups, but also in terms of rural and urban population. Means when the urban areas get much more industries developed in that places, people from rural background or from rural areas try to move to the urban areas in order to get good profession, good job, good occupation, good salary, good education, good life opportunities, because they treat that urban area having much more facility than the rural background, and this results in the higher rate of social mobility. Despite this, urban population have been growing much more rapidly than the rural ones, and this is due to the large rates of migration rather than due to a natural increase in the population. This is again an important factor to keep in mind, that because of the natural growth in the population, the mobility increases, but here the movement or the migration of people from rural area to urban area increases because of the availability of much more opportunities in the urban setup. From the mobility angle, this means that new kind of vacancies like emergence of old age homes, hospitals forces people to move from one place to another, and this created much more higher rates of migration, which in turn results in the higher rates of social mobility. Thus, the demographic factor definitely has a bearing on social mobility, but is itself not a purely biological phenomenon, as social factors in general have a bearing on demography. Mandelbaum and others have for example written on how cultural factors such as sun preference has affected population structures, and in the Indian context it can be seen very commonly that much preference is given to the birth of a male child, and many families we can see in our social setup even now that to have a male child, male boy or a male child in the family, there is no doubt number of girl childs are there, but still they are having the mindset to have one at least one male child in their family, and this results in the increase in the population. So, here the relationship between the demographic factor, that is increase in population, and social mobility is important to understand, because it is not only a natural phenomena. No doubt the role of natural phenomena in the increase in population is very common, but when we talk about in the context of social mobility, then demographic factor holds a different significance or different angle to study, because here it is not only the biological or natural phenomena, but it is the migration of the population because of the one reason or the other to another area, and in this way the demographic factor affects social mobility. Now, another factor which is responsible or working for social mobility is talent and ability. Sorokin notes that usually ability of parents and children do not match in ascriptive societies. Children may not always be as suited to their inherited status position as their parents, as we see in our Indian traditional setup, where we talk about the caste hierarchy, then definite occupations were ascribed to certain caste, and it was assumed earlier that what the occupation was of father, followed by the next generation. But with the passage of time, with the development in the science and technology, increase in the education, industrialization, modernization, a number of factors are working, and this traditional setup get changed. And now in the ascriptive societies also, it is not necessary that the son followed the same tradition, same occupation as followed by their father or their ancestors. Many ways are suggested by Sorokin to get around this problem, that those children who do not get acquaint with the traditional status, when they face their problem, they move towards another society, another occupation, and as a result this difference of occupation between the father and the child definitely move ahead or give much more chances to social mobility. Popular pressure may force individuals to vacate position as they are unsuited for. So in this way, talent and ability also hold significant position for social mobility. And if we talk in the modern setup, then there are various dimensions, there are various ways which give open space for the population to come forward and show their talent. On the basis of their ability, they can move out of their traditional mindset, of their traditional social setup, and get much more opportunity to avail in the vast opening social scenario. So talent and ability nowadays give much more impetus to social mobility. Lipset and Bendix state that there are always new supplies of talent which must be absorbed somewhere or the other. Recently, I had one example. I met with a person who explained me that the father is in the traditional setup, working in a traditional scenario, but his son studied differently and working in the different arena of innovation and research. And this is the example that definitely it is not necessary that the traditional occupation of the father must be essentially followed by their children. Because of the number of opportunities, their talents get exposed, and there are various avenues where that talent get consumed in the society, and this result in the development, in the innovation, in the social setup, and in the scientific manner. And in this way we can say that demographic factor affects social mobility. At the same time, difference in the perception, in the avenues, in the choices of father and children, or parents and children, definitely gives much more impetus to social mobility, and this results in the upward mobility. For example, Burgle in his study of social stratification points out that even in the rigidly hierarchical feudal system, there was opportunity for persons of low birth, even from among the bonded, to rise into the favor of ministerials, means to their higher position. Closer to home, the bestowing of a jagir was a sign of appreciation for services rendered. Means when the officer or the higher class get satisfied, feel happy by the services of the lower class, then they give them those opportunity to raise their standard and to give them the chance for upward social mobility. Mobility of this kind was said as sponsored mobility by Turner, which was explained by me in the last video, contrasted to contest mobility, because sponsored mobility is definitely having someone else to give the chance or to sponsor that mobility to a person because of his goodness of work which was done by him. And in the contest mobility, a person have to fight himself or herself to achieve that mobility, and this classification of sponsored mobility and contest mobility was given by Turner. Although these terms were not coined with respect to pre-industrial forms of mobility. In substance, this theory states that positions in society are filled on the basis of talent and training of individuals for the different social positions. As we are well acquainted that every position in the social setup require definite setup, definite rules and regulations, and for that, to achieve that position, a specific sort of training is given. Sometimes this training require formal procedure, and sometimes in the social setup we get certain sort of training informally. So, this is the training which we get in the social setup. The most able are attracted to the most important positions by the differential reward attached to them. In this way, society is able to use its best human resource in the important social positions. So, in the context of what we are at present, names because of the ability of individual, critics have pointed out that it is naive to assume that even in the open societies, much less the more closed ones, allocated individuals to position on the basis of ability. Thus, talent and ability again hold very important position for social mobility. Now, the third factor is the inequality of opportunity, means that even the able individual from the less privileged groups will not be able to rise. Various empirical studies of mobility in Western industrial societies have also shown that at large amount of that mobility recorded is mass mobility, that is mobility across the manual and non-manual divide. The class of origin still matters, is that the topmost positions and the lowest positions are largely self-recruiting. Therefore, talent is a factor which has limited role in explaining mobility. Now, another theory which is important to discuss here in this context is the theory of elite or elite theories, which was popularly defined and explained by Pareto. According to Pareto, talent and ability are the chief reasons by which certain individual occupy certain specific position. Pareto argued that it was innate superiority that created the elite, yet it was possible that the elite might lose their abilities, or person from lower strata could exhibit those qualities, and thus change in the elite could take place, which is popularly defined as said as circulation of elite theory given by Pareto. Sorokin is of the view that changes in the social environment lead to changes in the democratic factors such as life expectancy and the talents of the individual. Because of the increase in the science and development, therefore, the demographic factors, the life expectancy of an individual get increase. In addition to this, because of the development of science and technology and new areas of expansion and innovation, talent also get much more exposure, and new sort of talents are getting significance in the social setup. Thus, there is change in the social environment, and this change in the social environment result in the increase in social mobility. Changes of different kinds like economic, social, political, legal and technology, definitely all these changes affect mobility. Lipset and Bendix list 5 main points, the factors of social mobility in industrial societies. These are: first, changes in the number of available vacancies. Second is different rates of fertility. Third is change in the ranks accorded to occupations. Fourth is changes in the number of inheritable status position, and last is changes in the legal restrictions pertaining to potential opportunities. They explained these features in a very detailed manner and explained that mobility is getting affected because of the innumerable reasons, and social mobility regards these 5 prominent reasons responsible, in which they give chances to the increase in the number of available vacancies, where a person find more vacancies available to work, definitely will move to that place, and this we can see in the difference of the rural and urban areas. Therefore, migration is there not only from rural to urban areas, but also from national to international areas, and this is the reason that changes in the number of available vacancies create mobility. different rates of fertility also, because at a specific age a person required to get family setup get stable, but in that case if it is not there, then they move to those areas where the availability to get the facilities are much more easier. Changes in the rank according to occupations is also responsible, and there is change in the number of inheritable status position, because traditional society regards certain positions inherited, very important, but with the change in the society, with the changing areas because of industrialization and modernization, those inherited status get changed. And in addition to it, legal restrictions also plays a vital role. Thus, because of the increase of industrialization, mechanization, and there is shift of occupation from agriculture to industries, therefore there is much more availability of vacancies in the urban areas or in the industrial areas, and there is increase in the number of positions available in the society. Changes in the political and legal framework can also be an important source of social mobility. The traditional caste order in India assigned individual to traditional occupations, and certain occupations such as learned occupations were legally or customarily forbidden by the people of low birth. It was traditionally seen in the Indian society also, but the democratization of political systems with the concept of all citizens having equal rights under the law removed these barriers to social mobility. Now, it is true that many of the occupations today are filled on the basis of the formal qualification. Earlier, certain occupations were reserved, were given significance to birth, but with the passage of time, this traditional setup get changed, and now because of certain training, because of certain formal qualification, jobs or occupations are available to those people who belong to lower caste or lower class. Thus, though legal barriers to mobility may have been removed, social inequalities themselves prove as barriers to mobility. I have said earlier also that this is not only the legal perception responsible for the barriers in the mobility, there are certain social inequalities also which considered as a barrier for people to get mobile, or don't allow people to move from one place to another, either because of the traditional affection to that particular place, traditional attachment to that particular occupation. There are various reasons which are still existing and not allowing people to move from their area, and these become barriers or hurdles in the way of social mobility. The Marxist view of stratification and mobility is based on the class nature of society. Marx posted that as capitalism developed, there would be a tendency towards polarization, and by this he mean that the stratification system would come to resemble a pyramid with the masses of people bunched at the bottom. Even the intermediate groups such as petty bourgeois, small landowners and others would in course of time find themselves demoted, and thus if at all mobility was a feature of capitalism, it was downward rather than the upward social mobility. So, here he focused about the various subjective factors which are responsible for social mobility. In many cases, of course, mobility takes place involuntarily, as many happen in the case of re-ranking of occupation. Those occupations which earlier were considered as or at lower or at the secondary position, with the passage of time now given due importance, and with the re-ranking of occupations, those people or positions which were secondary now become primary. As a result, upward social mobility takes place. But given individual in similar position, what motivate one to strive for mobility and another not for that mobility is a personal matter, because everybody don't have same perception towards the same opportunity. Veblen book The Theory of Leisure Class allow us to infer that every stratification system is automatically a source of mobility. Where there is a stratification, there is chance of higher and lower ranking, and when there is chance of higher and lower ranking, definitely the chances of mobility exist. This is because every individual's estimation of himself or herself is largely based on others' evaluation of them. What they evaluate, that creates their position in the society, and thus they will aspire to those positions which society deems to be worthwhile. The process of Sanskritization shows how it is in fact a commitment to the value of the caste system that is the source of aspiration and mobility. Therefore, every stratification system according to Weber is a source of mobility, and this is because self evaluation depends on the evaluation of other, and this can be seen in the traditional setup of Sanskritization. Merton has also written about the importance of reference groups in determining social behavior, and he stated that the individual who seek to be mobile has a reference group, a non-membership group rather than his own group, and then he tried to become a member of that group, and this results in the mobility. So, this was the concept of the Merton, which was popularly known as the reference group, of which the person himself is not a member, but try or work hard to become or to get the membership of that reference group. And social mobility has been treated as a dependent variable, whereas social structure is the independent one. Thus, instead of a discussion in terms of objective factor versus subjective factor as distinct and separate, one should link structure and agencies and look at their interrelation, and this result in the formation of the social mobility. Wherever there is social change, with the social change, number of new introduction is there in the society. Those who try to cope up with those changes, those who try to work with those changes, definitely get mobile and prefer for social mobility. So, social mobility along with social reproduction definitely gives new direction to the society. It can be upward or it can be downward social mobility. Various sociologists from time to time have given their ideas or given their theories in this context of mobility. Merton's work on social structure and anomy sheds more light on this. He differentiates between socially accepted goals and means of achieving these goals. The goals refer to the values of society, and those who accept the goals and means of achieving them are conformist. But there may be those who reject the goals, and that is the values as well as the means of achieving them. It is a very common phenomenon, and that results in the rebellion sort of nature of the people. Those who accept the phenomena which are taking place definitely are known by the term of conformist, because they give confirmation to the things which are taking place in the society. But those who disagree to that, those who want to get certain changes in the social scenario, definitely retreat them, and retreatism or maybe rebel against the society considered as of rebellious nature or known as rebellion. Thus, it is very common that in the society mobility is associated with discontentment also. So, when a discontentment is there with the existing system, leads to the change in the system. This itself will throw up new position, and therefore mobility takes place. Therefore, it is difficult to clearly separate the objective factors and the subjective factors into watertight compartments, because in the society definitely it is required, the survival of all those is must, but the survival is possible when sometimes they accept the things and sometimes they work of not accepting the things, and while not accepting the scenario they prefer the way of rebel, and in that way the conformist and of rebellious nature people are existing in the society. So, social mobility sometimes takes place in the upward movement and sometimes takes place in the downward movement, but it cannot be said that the factors which are responsible for social mobility are always objective or are always subjective, because it cannot be possible to have the reasons responsible either objective or subjective in the watertight air compartment. It is a society, and in the social scenario people of objective features are also present and available. At the same time, those who work in the subjective mindset or subjective viewpoints are also existing. So, social structure may itself generate anomy and that result in the social mobility. Thus, in this video we have tried to talk about the social mobility in detail, along with the factors responsible for the social mobility, and also we have tried to discuss about the barriers which are responsible for the mobility. Social mobility is that important concept which takes place in the society, and as a student of sociology it is very important to know about the relationship between the social mobility and the social reproduction system in the society. Thank you.